Janna Vraja Janna Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Dhanna Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Dhanna Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shokta Sri Srimad Srimad Bhakti-yoga Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Skamsastapakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadada Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru E Gauranga. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namune Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Vacharine Nirvishesha Shunyamari Vishasha Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadana Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 4, Vidura approaches Maitreya, text 3, translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-yoga Swami Prabhupada. So before we go to the verse, let's briefly summarize the events that lead to this point. The 3rd canto mentions the destruction of the Yadu dynasty, which then is described in detail in the 11th canto. So the summary is that at one point the young princes of the Yadu and Bhoja dynasties, they made great sages very angry according to the plan of the Lord, and the sages cursed them. So Krishna, he made the descendants of the Vrishni, Bhoja and Andaka dynasties go to Prabhas, a place of pilgrimage. And all those who went were incarnations of demigods. And the others who were eternal associates, they stayed back in Dwaraka. So then at that holy place, they did what generally everybody does, taking bath, offering oblations, respect to the forefathers and sages, charity to the brahmanas, etc. And then they took prasadam, and then a drink. Not a lassi, not a mango shake, liquor made of fermented rice. And as it is said here, by drinking they all became delirious. And bereft of knowledge, they touched the cores of each other's hearts with harsh words. And then we have this nice analogy of bamboos who may rub against each other when they're dry in a forest, and then fire appears. So it says here, as by the friction of bamboos destruction takes place, also at sunset, by the interaction of the force of intoxication, all their minds became unbalanced, and destruction took place, which means they all were killed except for a handful. So the Yadu dynasty were, as Prabhupada says, 10 million members. So it's a big war. Fratricidal, you say? Fratricidal war. 10 million people killed. So this is the point. Let's see, now we come to our verse of today. Bhagavan Svatma Mayaya Gating Tam Avalokya Saha Sarasvatim Upasrishya Vrikshamulam Upavishat Bhagavan Svatma Mayaya Gating Tam Avalokya Saha Sarasvatim Upasrishya Vrikshamulam Upavishat Bhagavan Svatma Mayaya Gating Tam Avalokya Saha Sarasvatim Upasrishya Vrikshamulam Upavishat Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sva-atma Mayaya, by his internal potency, Gatim, the end, Tam, that, Avalokya, foreseeing, Saha, he, Krishna, Sarasvatim, the river Sarasvati, upasrishya, after sipping water, vrikshamulam, at the foot of a tree, upavishat, sat down. Translation. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, after foreseeing the end of his family by his internal potency, went to the bank of the river Sarasvati, sipped water, and sat down underneath a tree. Purport. All the above-mentioned activities of the Yadus and Bhojas were executed by the internal potency of the Lord, because he wanted them to be dispatched to their respective abodes after he had finished his mission of descent. They were all his sons and grandsons, and were given complete protection by the paternal affection of the Lord. How they could be vanquished in the presence of the Lord is answered in this verse. Everything was done by the Lord himself, Svatma Mayaya. The Lord's family members were either incarnations of his plenary expansions or demigods from the heavenly planets, and thus before his departure he separated them by his internal potency. Before being dispatched to their respective abodes, they were sent to the holy place of Prabhasa, where they performed pious activities and took food and drink to their heart's content. It was then arranged for them to be sent back to their abodes, so that others could see that the powerful Yadu dynasty was no longer in the world. In the previous verse, the word anugyata, indicating that the whole sequence of events was arranged by the Lord, is significant. These particular pastimes of the Lord are not a manifestation of his external energy or material nature. Such an exhibition of his internal potency is eternal, and therefore one should not conclude that the Yadus and Bhojas died in a drunken state in an ordinary fratricidal war. Sri Jiva Goswami comments on these incidents as magical performances. Bhagavan Svatma Mayaya Gatim Tam Avalokya Saha Sarasvatim Upasrishya Vrikshamulam Upavishat. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, after foreseeing the end of his family by his internal potency, went to the bank of the river Sarasvati, sipped water, and sat down underneath a tree. So this end of the Yadu dynasty is mentioned in different parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and depending on the circumstance or the context, there are different explanations given, which also shows us that one has to be careful when reading a verse and then taking one meaning. It may not be what it looks like. Generally, we are told that there's no need for interpretation, right? Bhagavad Gita as it is. But again, not always it's the case. Sometimes a description needs the right understanding, which means an interpretation. And for that we, of course, have to go to our previous acharyas, including Srila Prabhupada. Otherwise we get the wrong idea. For example, let's look at the previous chapter. It is mentioned that the Yadu dynasty, it's actually Krishna speaking. He says, so now after the battle of Kurukshetra, the burden of the earth was relieved, but still there is the Yadu dynasty, which may be a more unbearable burden. So, first thought comes, if the earth was burdened by, how you say, not unpious, what's the other word? Demonic kings. So then the Yadu dynasty is more unbearable, so maybe they are more demoniac? No. Well, we may think like that. So therefore, in the purport, first thing Prabhupada says, there's two kinds of burdens. There is the burden of the beast and the burden of love. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he mentions the burden of love in connection to the Yadu dynasty. And he gives examples, that's Vishwanath Chakravarti saying, for example, the husband may be a burden on the young wife. Well, sometimes the young wife may be a burden on the husband. Then we have the child on the lap of a mother, may be a burden. And wealth may be a burden for a businessman. Okay. And then there is the burden of separation, which is heavier to bear than these ordinary burdens. So, when Lord Krishna referred to the burden of the Yadu dynasty on the earth, he referred to something different than that burden which is like, heavy child on the lap, husband or wife to the spouse, wealth to the business. This is different. So the large numbers of family members born of Krishna counted some millions. And they were a source of great pleasure for the earth. So when the Lord referred to them in connection with a burden, he had in mind their imminent disappearance from the earth, and therefore such a burden is the burden of separation. And he says at the end, Prabhupada, Srila Jiva Goswami confirms this inference. So it's an interpretation. It's not evident from the verse itself, but the acharyas know what it means, so we get the right idea if we study Srila Prabhupada's books, his purports, where all this is mentioned. The next verse, also when we just read it as it is, sounds not very favorable. When they quarrel, the Yadu dynasty, among themselves, influenced by intoxication, with their eyes red like copper because of drinking, then only will they disappear. Otherwise, it will not be possible. On my disappearance, this incident will take place. So Krishna disappears, and he arranges that his family members also will disappear. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna's associates, his eternal associates, they're not subject to the laws of material nature. So therefore, this disappearance was a make-show of a fight. Or as we heard before, Srila Jiva Goswami called it a magical performance. It's a show. So this happens quite often. We will see some more examples. That Krishna makes an arrangement with his devotees to create a certain situation favorable for his mission or just for his pastimes, like that. In this purport, Prabhupada mentions Arjuna, who apparently becomes bewildered, as we can see in the first chapter. So much so that the bow slips from his hand, he begins to tremble, tears come to his eyes, and Krishna criticizes him. He calls it a weakness of heart. And in that context, sometimes Prabhupada goes along with this thread of thought, and Arjuna is depicted as somebody who is bewildered and lost his good sense. But then here Prabhupada says, just as Arjuna was made to be illusioned by family affection, and thus the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, so the Yadu dynasty was made to be intoxicated by the will of the Lord and nothing more. It's all an arrangement. Another example we have is Maharaj Parikshit, who apparently becomes thirsty and then angry when the sage doesn't respond, and he puts that dead snake on his body, and the son takes revenge by cursing him. This is also described as being the arrangement of the Lord. It's all happening by the will of the Lord. Otherwise, and also, of course, Maharaj Parikshit could have counteracted the curse. He didn't do it. And all this was taking place. Why? So that Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. In one lecture, it's also interesting, this angle of vision. Prabhupada speaks about the Yadu dynasty, and he says, there are two comments on this point, that they were destroyed, or why they were destroyed. One comment is that if they would continue to live, then the same misconception that a Brahmana is born in the Brahmana family, they would continue to speak that we are also gods because we are born in God's family, Krishna's family. So this undue pride may arise. So this is one comment that is made. And then there's another comment, very interesting. So the family of Krishna, Prabhupada says, there's no power in the whole world that anybody could kill them. So Krishna planned that they should be killed amongst themselves by fighting. So that's another lesson, Prabhupada says, that if we fight amongst ourselves, even if we belong to the family of Krishna, the international Krishna society, we are ruined. This is the instance of Yadukula. Although they belong to Krishna's family directly, still, because they fought amongst themselves, they were all vanquished. So you can see these pastimes, you can see them from different angles and take different lessons. And there's no point of arguing, but it's all a show. So why would you now say that they became ruined or something like that? Well, it's the lesson for us, that we should not act in such a way that fighting amongst ourselves, the whole mission of Krishna consciousness movement becomes ruined. So the whole, this whole pastime, or this incident of the Yadu dynasty's destruction, is described in the 11th canto. I think I will skip this and let's see some other parts. In the first canto, there's in different parts, chapter 15, for example, it's also mentioned. For example, that they fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. And then again, it is said factually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord. Sometimes people kill one another, and at other times they protect one another. Or you may have heard this, that like stronger aquatics swallow up smaller and weaker ones, so the stronger Yadu kills the weaker Yadu. All right. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he mentions this and other pastimes in Madhya Lila. It's in chapter 23. He speaks to Sanatana Goswami, and he calls, now this is also surprising, he says, illusory stories opposed to the conclusions of Krishna consciousness concern the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. Krishna's disappearance, the story that Krishna and Balaram arise from a black hair and a white hair of Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, and the story about the kidnapping of the queens. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained to Sanatana Goswami the proper conclusions of these stories. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about all these different ones. We now go to the it's called Maushala Leela, the end pastimes. Actually, Maushala means club. So a pastime where they fight each other with clubs. So some of Lord Krishna's pastimes are mentioned in the Mahabharata as Maushala Leela. They include the stories of the destruction of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna's disappearance, his being pierced by a hunter's arrow, the story of Krishna's being an incarnation of a piece of hair, Kesha Avatar, as well as Mahishi Harana, the kidnapping of Krishna's queens. And now, Prabhupada says this, actually, these are not factual, but are related for the bewilderment of the asuras, who want to prove that Krishna is an ordinary human being. They are false, these stories. They are false in the sense that these pastimes are not eternal, nor are they transcendental or spiritual. So, are we bewildered? Okay. What other stories do we have? There's quite a few, where curses happen, arranged by the Lord. Yeah, maybe. Jai Vijay, thank you, yes. So this is an interesting one. And there's a lot of interesting comments by Srila Prabhupada, so let's look at that. We know the story, very simple summary. 4 Kumaras want to see Vishnu, come to Vaikuntha. The Jai Vijaya, the doorkeepers, they don't let them in. The 4 Kumaras become angry, curse them to go down to the material world. So, in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada says that Jai and Vijay were certainly offenders. But as Vaishnavas, the 4 sages should not have cursed them. But they did it because of having been haughty. This sounds all strange. Jai Vijay are offenders, and the 4 Kumaras have become proud, and therefore they curse them. So, when this story is related, Maharaj Yudhishthira speaking with Narada Muni, he can't believe it. He is also bewildered, and he asks, what kind of great curse could affect even liberated Vishnu Bhaktas, which means Jai Vijay? And what sort of person could curse even the Lord's associates? I mean, what is this? For unflinching devotees of the Lord to fall again into this material world is impossible. I cannot believe this. So we are, if sometimes we think, I can't believe this, what I'm reading here, I'm bewildered. So you're not alone. It's not offensive. But we should find out the answer, how to resolve an apparent or contradictory or illusory or bewildering event. So in the purport, very interesting purport, first of all, Prabhupada speaks about Bhagavad Gita, and first thing he quotes is Mam upecha tu kaunteya punajanma navidyate, one who is purified of material contamination and returns home back to Godhead does not return to the material world, first thing. And therefore he says at the end of the purport, Maharaj Yudhishthira therefore was surprised that a pure devotee could return to the material world. This is certainly a very important question. So then we have another purport. Prabhupada says, this very significant question would be difficult for any ordinary person to answer. But Narada Muni, being an authority, could answer it. So let's hear what is the answer. So therefore Maharaj Yudhishthira inquired from him, saying, Etat akyatum arhasi, only you can explain the reason. From authoritative sources, it can be discerned that associates of Lord Vishnu who descend from Vaikuntha do not actually fall. They come with a purpose of fulfilling the desire of the Lord, and their descent to this material world is comparable to that of the Lord. So therefore, it is to be understood that when Jai and Vijay descended to this material world, they came because there was something to be done for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, it is a fact that no one falls from Vaikuntha. So then, here again at the end of this purport, Prabhupada says, Maharaj Yudhishthira says, Ashradeya ivabati. Now Ashradeya means Ashrada. Shraddha means faith or a conviction. And Ashradeya, I can't understand this. I don't believe it. So that the statement that a servant of the Lord could fall from Vaikuntha seems unbelievable, Prabhupada says. How Jai and Vijay came to that is explained by Narada Muni. And then, the story, Narada Muni will explain the reason that the Lord wanted to fight. In the material world, he doesn't have a worthy opponent. So his devotees come, and it's like, taking playing a role, like in a theater, a mock fight, like that. Then let's see. I mentioned Maharaj Parikshit. Just we see a few quotes, which also indicates what I said. By placing King Parikshit in an awkward position, the incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam was created by the will of the Lord. So the situation in this case was therefore all planned by the Lord. But again, then in one purport, although it's all arranged by the Lord, still we get lessons. He calls Shringi a foolish boy. You may say, but he's an instrument. Why is he now foolish? He's just playing a part in this arrangement. No, he's a foolish boy out of sheer vanity of being a Brahmana's son. He is cursing. So you can see simultaneously different things are happening. He's an instrument, okay, but at the same time, his own situation is that because of being a Brahmana's son, he is proud, and therefore foolishly he curses a king. And therefore, Prabhupada says, by cursing the king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. But it's arranged by the Lord. Why is he now an offender? So we have to accommodate these apparently contradictory things. And actually Prabhupada says, although Maharaj Parikshit's situation was planned by the Lord, the sage, his son, and the king are depicted as exhibiting undesirable qualities and being responsible for their actions which seem to be contradictory. So it's not sometimes easy to understand these things as they are described when we just take them as there is and don't have, further, more profound knowledge. There's another curse. Let's have another curse, Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes, I have it right here. at least some devotees have read Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai. So, some brief summary. Chitraketu is flying around the universe, trying to enjoy life also. And he comes upon Shiva having Parvati on his lap, and he laughs. Shouldn't do that. Prabhupada says in the purport, Chitraketu should have known that Lord Shiva, although sitting in that way, was not to be criticized. But he laughed. The difficulty was that Chitraketu, having become a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, Sankarshan, was somewhat proud. And thought that he could now criticize anyone. Even Lord Shiva. This kind of pride in the devotees never tolerated. So therefore Mother Parvati was justified in punishing Chitraketu, for Chitraketu impudently criticized the Supreme Father, Mahadev, who is the father of all living entities. A pure Vaishnava should be very careful to engage in his specific duty without criticizing others. So that's one angle of vision. Now we get the other angle of vision. In effect, Lord Shiva told Parvati, both Chitraketu and I are always very dear to the Supreme Lord. In other words, both he and I are on the same level as servants of the Lord. We are always friends. And sometimes we enjoy joking words between us. So when Chitraketu loudly laughed at my behavior, he did so in friendly terms. And therefore there was no reason to curse him. So then Prabhupada says, Shiva tried to convince his wife that her cursing of Chitraketu was not very sensible. It is clear that Chitraketu wanted to criticize the behavior of his friend, Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva was sitting with his wife on his lap. Then too, Lord Shiva wanted to criticize Chitraketu for externally posing as a great devotee, but being interested in joining with the Vidyadhari women. He was flying around in his airplane, looking for, pleasure spots, like Hawaii or, places like that. So these were all friendly jokes. There was nothing serious for which Chitraketu should have been cursed by Parvati. So this, again, appears contradictory. Before, it was said that, yes, this was all completely justified because he impudently criticized Shiva, he became proud. Now it is said, these were all friendly jokes, so it's nothing serious for which Chitraketu should have been cursed. Okay, I'm wondering, should we have another one? Which is not exactly a curse. I think it's let's do this quickly. We have still 10 minutes. The case of Bharat Maharaj. As you, I hopefully all know, reading 5th canto, Bharat Maharaj, he left his kingdom, as so many other kings in those days, and he began to become absorbed in Krishna consciousness, rising to the stage of bhava, which is just before prema. It's a very advanced stage. Bhava is described as you could say, a ray of the sun of prema. It's practically the same, just a little less in quantity. So from there, he fell down. Right? So, and he became affectionate with the deer and all that. So then Shukadeva Goswami, he says, and he's speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, my dear king, in this way Bharat Maharaj was overwhelmed by an uncontrollable desire, which was manifest in the form of the deer. Due to the fruitive results of his past deeds, he fell down from mystic yoga, austerity, and worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not due to his past fruitive activity, how could he have been attracted to the deer after giving up the association of his own son and family, considering them stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual life? How could he show such uncontrollable affection for a deer? I mean, well, of course, not so difficult to understand nowadays. People have uncontrollable affection for dogs. I mean, I'm not going to get into this, but wherever I go, the worst thing are the dogs of the neighbors. Everybody has a dog. I was just in Chile. We had, some program in the park. Every single person walking in that park had a dog. And sometimes not one dog, 2 dogs. You have 2 hands, you can have 2 dogs. And some more, anyway. So affection for a deer is actually a very elevated type of affection compared to an ugly dog. And, they bark all the time for nothing. So it's really, a deer doesn't bark. So if you want to have a pet, take a deer. Don't take a dog. No, seriously. Cats and dogs, and nowadays, of course, they also have serpents. You may have seen. They take it as a how you say, un collar, necklace, right? Birds, spiders. If you're a goth type of person, everything black, and you have a black spider on your shoulder. Even alligators. There was an instance, a guy had an alligator in his basement in a type of small pool, small alligator. So they became friends, right? And then when the alligator was growing up, at one point, they just ripped off the whole arm and ate it. So don't take an alligator as a pet. So we continue here. So now Bharat Maharaj became so much affectionate to this deer, and Shukadeva Goswami says this was definitely due to his past karma. That's it. Now, Prabhupada in the purport, he says, a question may be raised. How can a devotee be affected by his past misconduct and vicious activities, by his karma? And he quotes Brahma Samhita, Karmani nirdadhati kintu cha bhakti bhajan. For those engaged in devotional service, bhakti bhajan, the results of past deeds are indemnified, which means they are, erased, eliminated. According to this, Bharat Maharaj could not be punished for his past misdeeds. The conclusion must be that Maharaj Bharat purposefully became over-addicted to the deer and neglected his spiritual advancement. Purposefully. Why? What? Why somebody would be... So we will find out why. So Prabhupada says, this was just to increase his desire for mature devotional service. Although, because then Bharat Maharaj becomes a deer, although awarded the body of an animal, he did not forget what had previously happened due to his purposeful mistake. He was very anxious to get out of the deer body, and this indicates that his affection for devotional service was intensified. Then there's a commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who also speaks about this, and surely Prabhupada took it from there. He says, that Bharat Maharaj fell from his position in yoga and worship of the Lord by the influence of karmas of this life, which manifested a small deer to him. And now comes the important part. Prarabdha karma is of 2 types, auspicious and inauspicious. The first type occurs by the will of the Lord to increase longing for devotion to the Lord, like sharp ointment applied to the eyes. This is accepted favorably by the devotee. So it's possible that apparently karma is experienced, but it's the first type, the auspicious type of prarabdha karma, which is arranged by the Lord for us to advance. Being similar to prarabdha karma, it is accepted as such. So therefore the same word is used, which sometimes also may bewilder us. It's called also prarabdha karma, but it's of two types. So the second type, of course, is the result of actions of previous lifetimes, which is the ordinary karma that one has to suffer. So then he says, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, so that Bharat Maharaj fell from worship of the Lord by the will of the Lord. How else could he fall? Except by prarabdha karma arranged by the will of the Lord. All right. Under the influence of his good prarabdha karma, Bharat took care of the deer. So it was arranged by the Lord for the purpose of increasing his longing for bhakti. So I'll stop here. We have officially 4 minutes. Any comments or questions? Yes, please. Oh, he gets a mic. Good.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Thank you for class, Maharaj. My question is, how much of the events in our lives can we consider the direct arrangement?
Better you don't think like that. I mean, it may be, but actually, if it happens to us, we never, think that this is an arrangement of the Lord. We should think it's my fault, right? Like, for example, suffering. This tatenu kampam susamikshmano, bunjana evatma kritam vipakam, means the devotee, when there is suffering, he will think, this is due to my own evat kritam, my own activity. I am now reaping that fruit. One does not think, it's the fault of somebody else. It could be. So it may be that it's an arrangement by the Lord, but then one has to see the result of your of the activity. If it increases bhakti, then it's positive. Yeah, more or less. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you have to get a mic also, yes. We have... It was on probably. Yeah.
Thank you very much for there were 2 points that pointed out that pride is actually so powerful for our bhakti, and that we can be very much bewildered by pride. And also we start to do offenses, etc. And I was wondering why we have such a strong tendency to become prideful.
To be?
To become proud.
Puffed up.
Yeah.
Proud.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna begins to enumerate the qualities of demons, right, in the 16th chapter, what are the first 3? Damba, Darpana, Abhiman, which are practically synonymous. Damba is pride. Darpana, which actually means mirror. You look at the mirror and say, how do you, well, you look nice. So that's vanity. And then Abhiman, this false conception that I am this and I am that, and probably you're feeling like, we're very important or very great. So 3 of them, which are practically the same, that's the first 3 that Krishna mentions. So that means what to do when the living entity is in the material world. That's what is the first thing you think? Ishvaroham, aham bogi, Sukhaham, Balavan. What is it? No. Balavan Sukhi. So I'm the greatest. You remember? You don't know this. The old people know this. Cassius Clay, 1964, becoming world champion, and he goes in front to the ring where all the people with the cameras are, and I'm the greatest. Right? Yeah. So especially because he was a black person in the 60s, that was still not so easy. So that was his abhiman. I'm the greatest. Few years later, he had Parkinson's, and he couldn't even hold a cup of tea, without trembling. No more greatest. But this idea that I am the greatest, Ishwaroham, I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm this, I'm that, it comes with being conditioned in the material world. So to get rid of it, that's the problem, that's the difficulty. Trinarapi sunichena. So it's a lifetime, or maybe many lifetimes of work. But it's naturally happens to practically every conditioned soul. Like Prabhupada said, I remember he said, even the beggar will be proud of his penny. He is nothing, he's a beggar, he's one coin. It's mine, my treasure. So you think, well, this is crazy, it's foolish. Yeah, of course, but even the beggar is proud of his penny. What to speak of billionaires and millionaires, or anybody practically speaking. So, that's how it is, what to do. We have to, somehow or other, get rid of it. It's over time, 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.